An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. He humiliated her with a ridiculous dress to remind her of her place, but he didn't expect to burn with desire and jealousy when he saw her looking stunning in front of everyone. Now, she carries a secret capable of destroying the man she swore never to love. And he'll do anything to win her back, even if he has to get down on his knees. The rain beat against the windows of the Bradford mansion, like tears from a sky weeping for the secrets buried in those marble corridors. Emma adjusted her grey apron for the 5th time that morning, feeling the rough fabric scratch against her skin. 15 years. 15 long years separated the 5-year-old girl, who had watched her mother disappear forever, from the 20-year-old woman who now polished the same furniture, breathed the same air heavy with lies, and walked the same corridors where Teresa's last screams had echoed. Her hands trembled imperceptibly as she wiped the cloth over the portrait of the Bradford family that dominated the main hall. There he was, Daniel, still a teenager in the photo, but already with that look she had learned to recognize. Cold, calculating, superior. Next to him, his father, Richard Bradford, the man who had ordered her mother's disappearance. Dead for 5 years, he had taken his secrets to the grave, but not all of them. Some remained behind, hidden among yellowed papers and secret drawers that Emma had been methodically exploring, night after night. The sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor made her straighten up. She recognized the rhythm, firm, impatient, authoritative. Daniel descended the stairs like a man who owned the world, and perhaps he truly did. At 38, he had inherited not only the family fortune but also the arrogance that had run in Bradford veins for generations. He wore Italian suits even at home, kept his hair impeccably styled, and never ever spoke to the maids beyond what was strictly necessary. Until now. Emma pretended not to notice his approach, continuing to polish the bronze frame with circular, precise movements. She could feel his gaze upon her, a sensation that had become familiar in recent weeks. Something had changed since she began working here. At first she was invisible like all the other servants, but recently she'd noticed him watching her. Not with desire, not yet, but with an uncomfortable curiosity, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. "You," his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "What's your name again?" Emma turned slowly, keeping her eyes lowered as she had been taught. "Emma, Mr. Bradford." "Emma." He repeated the name as if testing its flavor. "How long have you been working here?" 2 months, sir." "And before that?" She raised her eyes for a fraction of a second, enough to meet his gaze. "I worked in other houses, sir, always in the same line of work." Daniel took a step closer, deliberately invading her personal space. His expensive cologne mingled with the scent of leather and power that emanated from his presence. "Other houses? Interesting. And tell me, Emma, what do you think of this house?" The question contained traps. Emma could feel it. "It's a beautiful house, sir, full of history." "History?" He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, much history. Some pages have been torn out, others rewritten. But what matters remains." He paused calculatingly. "You understand the importance of discretion, don't you?" "Perfectly, Mr. Bradford." "Good." Daniel stepped back but continued studying her. "Mrs. Martha told me you're efficient, that you don't ask unnecessary questions. I appreciate that in a maid." Emma nodded, clutching the cloth between her fingers. Mrs. Martha, the housekeeper, had been her gateway into the house. A woman embittered by years of service, who saw new maids as just more mouths to supervise. She didn't suspect that Emma had chosen to work specifically at the Bradford mansion, that she had studied every detail about the family, that she knew every secret the press had never published. "We'll have important visitors today," Daniel continued, "some business partners. I want everything to be impeccable, especially my father's office. Make sure nothing has been disturbed." The words carried weight. Emma knew he suspected something, but didn't know what. "Not yet." "Yes, sir. I can take care of that right away." "Do that." He walked away, but stopped before leaving the hall completely. "Oh, Emma, I hope you haven't developed the habit of other maids who've passed through here. Excessive curiosity tends to be harmful to one's health." The threat was subtle but clear. Emma kept her expression neutral. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Bradford." When he finally disappeared down the corridor, Emma allowed a cold smile to curve her lips. Harmful to one's health. Like her mother's health, who had officially died of pneumonia in a private clinic, away from witnesses, away from the truth. But Emma knew the truth. She knew because she had spent years investigating, years piecing together a puzzle that the Bradford family believed they had destroyed. She climbed the stairs toward the office, her heart beating at a rhythm that had nothing to do with physical effort. That room was the nerve center of the house, where Richard Bradford had made decisions that ruined so many lives. The dark, mahogany-paneled walls held secrets that could destroy not just Daniel, but the entire power structure the family had built over decades. The door was unlocked, as always. Daniel was too arrogant to imagine that anyone would dare to rifle through his papers. Emma entered and closed the door behind her, her heart racing. She had perhaps 20 minutes before someone noticed her absence. The mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, covered with documents organized with military precision. Emma already knew where to look. In the bottom drawers, behind a false wooden panel she had discovered weeks before, were the documents that really mattered. Obscure contracts, records of suspicious payments, letters that should never have been written. And in the midst of it all, kept like a macabre trophy, was the letter her mother had written in her final days. A desperate confession, a plea for help that never reached its intended recipient. Emma had read it so many times she could recite every word from memory. "I know what you've done. I know about the miners who disappeared. I know about the money you stole from orphans. I know about the women you silenced forever. My daughter cannot grow up in a world where you remain unpunished. If anything happens to me, look for the truth. It's all here, recorded, documented. Teresa." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pain tighten in her chest. Her mother had died alone, abandoned, not knowing that her daughter would grow up with the sole purpose of bringing justice. Not the justice of the courts, which Bradford money could buy, but the justice of blood, of revenge, of complete destruction. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her jump. Quickly, she put the letter back in its hiding place and closed the drawer. When the door opened, she was polishing the same bookshelf she had cleaned the previous week. "Still here?" Daniel's voice carried a barely disguised irritation. "Almost finished, Mr. Bradford. The bookshelf was very dusty." He walked to the desk, checking if the papers were in the exact position he had left them. Emma observed the ritual from the corner of her eye, noticing how he discreetly checked the drawer where he kept the most important documents. "You're very careful," he said without taking his eyes off the desk. "Meticulous. That's not a common quality among maids." "I was raised to do things well, sir." "Raised by whom?" The question caught her by surprise. Emma hesitated for a fraction of a second. "By the families I worked for before, sir. I learned that attention to detail is valued." Daniel finally turned to her, his dark eyes studying her face with disturbing intensity. "You remind me of someone." Emma's blood froze, but she kept her expression neutral. "Sir? I can't identify who. Perhaps it's just an impression." He moved closer, invading her personal space again. "You have interesting eyes. Green, like someone I knew a long time ago." Emma knew exactly who he was talking about. Her mother had had the same green eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same way of tilting her head when nervous. It was a miracle he hadn't made the connection yet. "Many people have green eyes, Mr. Bradford." "Yes," he murmured, but didn't back away. "Many people." He extended his hand, and for a terrible moment, Emma thought he was going to touch her, but he merely took a book from the shelf behind her, forcing her to lean back to avoid contact. "Can you read?" "Yes, sir." "What kind of books do you like?" "I don't usually have time for reading, sir. When I do, I prefer your stories of justice." "Where the guilty pay for their crimes?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How interesting. Do you believe in justice?" "I believe that every action has a consequence, sir. Sometimes it takes time, but it always comes." "Cheap Maid's philosophy." He laughed, but there was tension in the laugh. "Real life is more complex. Sometimes the innocent pay for the guilty. Sometimes the guilty never pay for anything." "Perhaps, sir, but I prefer to believe that in the end truth always wins." "Truth." Daniel repeated the word as if it were a foreign concept. "And what is truth, Emma? What happened, or what we can prove happened?" It was a question loaded with meaning. Emma knew he was testing her, probing if she knew something she shouldn't. "Truth is what really happened, sir, regardless of who believes it or not." Naive. He closed the book forcefully, Truth is what people with power decide is truth. Everything else is just inconvenience. Emma felt anger burn in her chest but forced herself to stay calm. "Perhaps you're right, sir." "I'm always right." Daniel returned behind the desk, reassuming his position of power. "You may go. And remember what we discussed about discretion." "Yes, Mr. Bradford." Emma left the room with measured steps, but as soon as the door closed behind her, she allowed herself a moment of weakness. She leaned against the wall, breathing deeply to control the adrenaline. Every conversation with Daniel was a minefield, every word a potential trap, but it was also an opportunity. He was interested in her, that was obvious. Not romantically, not yet, but there was something about her that intrigued him, and interest could be transformed into other things, things she could use against him. She descended the stairs thinking about the next phase of her plan. The Winter Ball was approaching, a social event that gathered Boston's elite at the Bradford mansion. It would be the perfect opportunity to plant the seeds of destruction. But before that, she needed to know more about the man she intended to destroy. Daniel Bradford wasn't just a spoiled heir. He was intelligent, observant, dangerous. Underestimating him would be a fatal mistake. Emma had spent years planning her revenge, but now she realized she might need a different approach, more subtle, more personal. Perhaps it was time to let him notice her not just as an efficient maid, but as a woman. The idea made her shiver, not from fear, but from a strange anticipation. There was something about Daniel that went beyond the anger she felt for him, something she didn't want to admit even to herself. When she reached the kitchen, she found Mrs. Martha organizing the menu for dinner. The housekeeper raised her eyes, noticing the troubled expression on the young woman's face. "Problems with the master?" she asked with a malicious smile. "No, Mrs. Martha, just... he asked some questions about my previous work." "Ah, yes. He's been suspicious lately. I think someone told him that one of the maids has been snooping where she shouldn't." Emma's blood froze. "Someone said that?" "Just rumors. You know how it is in a big house like this, there's always gossip. But be careful, girl. Mr. Bradford is not a man who forgives indiscretions." Emma nodded, feigning concern. "Thank you for the warning, Mrs. Martha." "You're welcome, dear. Now I need to talk to you about the ball. All the maids will participate this year." "Master's orders." "Participate how?" "Serving, of course, but he wants you all to look presentable. I'll provide dresses for everyone." Emma felt her heart accelerate. The ball, the opportunity she'd been waiting for. What kind of dresses? Simple ones, of course. Nothing that would make you stand out from the guests. After all, a maid's place is in the kitchen, not on the dance floor. "Of course, Mrs. Martha." But while pretending to agree, Emma's mind was already working. The ball would be her chance to approach Daniel differently, to plant the seed of doubt, of curiosity, of desire. Because destroying a man like him wasn't just a matter of exposing his crimes. It was a matter of making him destroy himself from within, and for that she needed him to desire her. That night, when the house finally quieted and all the masters had gone to bed, Emma went to the attic where her room was located. It was a small, stuffy space, furnished with only the essentials. But there, hidden among her few clothes, was her greatest weapon, the dress she would wear to the ball. Not the dress Mrs. Martha would provide, but the dress she had chosen herself, bought with money she had saved for months. A dress that would transform the invisible maid into something Daniel Bradford could never ignore. She held it against her body, observing her reflection in the foggy mirror. It was a deep green, the color of her eyes, the color of her mother's eyes. Elegant, yet provocative. Expensive, but not vulgar. Perfect for a woman who wanted to be noticed for all the wrong reasons. Emma smiled at her reflection. 15 years of waiting were coming to an end. Revenge would be sweet, but it would also be complicated. Because the more time she spent in Daniel Bradford's presence, the more she realized that hating him wasn't as simple as she had imagined. There was something about him that awakened feelings she didn't want to recognize, something that went beyond anger, beyond disdain, beyond the thirst for justice, something that made each encounter a battle not just against him, but against herself. But it didn't matter. Feelings could be controlled, used, transformed into weapons. And if in the end she had to sacrifice her own heart to destroy his, then so be it. After all, some wars require soldiers to die alongside their enemies. And this war had begun long ago on a rainy afternoon. when a 5-year-old girl saw her mother disappear forever into the cold corridors of the Bradford mansion. Now, it was time to finish what had begun on that day. The ball would be just the beginning. The rain beat against the windows of the Bradford mansion like tears from a sky weeping for the secrets buried in those marble corridors. Emma adjusted her grey apron for the 5th time that morning, feeling the rough fabric scratch against her skin. 15 years. 15 long years separated the 5-year-old girl, who had watched her mother disappear forever, from the 20-year-old woman who now polished the same furniture, breathed the same air heavy with lies, and walked the same corridors where Teresa's last screams had echoed. Her hands trembled imperceptibly as she wiped the cloth over the portrait of the Bradford family that dominated the main hall. There he was, Daniel, still a teenager in the photo, but already with that look she had learned to recognize. Cold, calculating, superior. Next to him, his father, Richard Bradford, the man who had ordered her mother's disappearance. Dead for 5 years, he had taken his secrets to the grave, but not all of them. Some remained behind, hidden among yellowed papers and secret drawers that Emma had been methodically exploring, night after night. The sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor made her straighten up. She recognized the rhythm, firm, impatient, authoritative. Daniel descended the stairs like a man who owned the world, and perhaps he truly did. At 38, he had inherited not only the family fortune but also the arrogance that had run in Bradford veins for generations. He wore Italian suits even at home, kept his hair impeccably styled, and never ever spoke to the maids beyond what was strictly necessary. Until now. Emma pretended not to notice his approach, continuing to polish the bronze frame with circular, precise movements. She could feel his gaze upon her, a sensation that had become familiar in recent weeks. Something had changed since she began working here. At first she was invisible like all the other servants, but recently she'd noticed him watching her. Not with desire, not yet, but with an uncomfortable curiosity, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. "You," his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "What's your name again?" Emma turned slowly, keeping her eyes lowered as she had been taught. "Emma, Mr. Bradford." "Emma." He repeated the name as if testing its flavor. "How long have you been working here?" "2 months, sir." "And before that?" She raised her eyes for a fraction of a second, enough to meet his gaze. "I worked in other houses, sir, always in the same line of work." Daniel took a step closer, deliberately invading her personal space. His expensive cologne mingled with the scent of leather and power that emanated from his presence. "Other houses? Interesting. And tell me, Emma, what do you think of this house?" The question contained traps. Emma could feel it. "It's a beautiful house, sir, full of history." "History?" He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, much history. Some pages have been torn out, others rewritten. But what matters remains." He paused calculatingly. "You understand the importance of discretion, don't you?" "Perfectly, Mr. Bradford." "Good." Daniel stepped back but continued studying her. "Mrs. Martha told me you're efficient, that you don't ask unnecessary questions. I appreciate that in a maid." Emma nodded, clutching the cloth between her fingers. Mrs. Martha, the housekeeper, had been her gateway into the house. A woman embittered by years of service, who saw new maids as just more mouths to supervise. She didn't suspect that Emma had chosen to work specifically at the Bradford mansion, that she had studied every detail about the family, that she knew every secret the press had never published. "We'll have important visitors today," Daniel continued, "some business partners. I want everything to be impeccable, especially my father's office. Make sure nothing has been disturbed." The words carried weight. Emma knew he suspected something, but didn't know what. "Not yet." "Yes, sir. I can take care of that right away." "Do that." He walked away, but stopped before leaving the hall completely. "Oh, Emma, I hope you haven't developed the habit of other maids who've passed through here. Excessive curiosity tends to be harmful to one's health." The threat was subtle but clear. Emma kept her expression neutral. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Bradford." When he finally disappeared down the corridor, Emma allowed a cold smile to curve her lips. Harmful to one's health. Like her mother's health, who had officially died of pneumonia in a private clinic, away from witnesses, away from the truth. But Emma knew the truth. She knew because she had spent years investigating, years piecing together a puzzle that the Bradford family believed they had destroyed. She climbed the stairs toward the office, her heart beating at a rhythm that had nothing to do with physical effort. That room was the nerve center of the house, where Richard Bradford had made decisions that ruined so many lives. The dark, mahogany-paneled walls held secrets that could destroy not just Daniel, but the entire power structure the family had built over decades. The door was unlocked, as always. Daniel was too arrogant to imagine that anyone would dare to rifle through his papers. Emma entered and closed the door behind her, her heart racing. She had perhaps 20 minutes before someone noticed her absence. The mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, covered with documents organized with military precision. Emma already knew where to look. In the bottom drawers, behind a false wooden panel she had discovered weeks before, were the documents that really mattered. Obscure contracts, records of suspicious payments, letters that should never have been written. And in the midst of it all, kept like a macabre trophy, was the letter her mother had written in her final days. A desperate confession, a plea for help that never reached its intended recipient. Emma had read it so many times she could recite every word from memory. "I know what you've done. I know about the miners who disappeared. I know about the money you stole from orphans. I know about the women you silenced forever. My daughter cannot grow up in a world where you remain unpunished. If anything happens to me, look for the truth. It's all here, recorded, documented. Teresa." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pain tighten in her chest. Her mother had died alone, abandoned, not knowing that her daughter would grow up with the sole purpose of bringing justice. Not the justice of the courts, which Bradford money could buy, but the justice of blood, of revenge, of complete destruction. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her jump. Quickly, she put the letter back in its hiding place and closed the drawer. When the door opened, she was polishing the same bookshelf she had cleaned the previous week. "Still here?" Daniel's voice carried a barely disguised irritation. "Almost finished, Mr. Bradford. The bookshelf was very dusty." He walked to the desk, checking if the papers were in the exact position he had left them. Emma observed the ritual from the corner of her eye, noticing how he discreetly checked the drawer where he kept the most important documents. "You're very careful," he said without taking his eyes off the desk. "Meticulous. That's not a common quality among maids." "I was raised to do things well, sir." "Raised by whom?" The question caught her by surprise. Emma hesitated for a fraction of a second. "By the families I worked for before, sir. I learned that attention to detail is valued." Daniel finally turned to her, his dark eyes studying her face with disturbing intensity. "You remind me of someone." Emma's blood froze, but she kept her expression neutral. "Sir? I can't identify who. Perhaps it's just an impression." He moved closer, invading her personal space again. "You have interesting eyes. Green, like someone I knew a long time ago." Emma knew exactly who he was talking about. Her mother had had the same green eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same way of tilting her head when nervous. It was a miracle he hadn't made the connection yet. "Many people have green eyes, Mr. Bradford." "Yes," he murmured, but didn't back away. "Many people." He extended his hand, and for a terrible moment, Emma thought he was going to touch her, but he merely took a book from the shelf behind her, forcing her to lean back to avoid contact. "Can you read?" "Yes, sir." "What kind of books do you like?" "I don't usually have time for reading, sir. When I do, I prefer your stories of justice." "Where the guilty pay for their crimes?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How interesting. Do you believe in justice?" "I believe that every action has a consequence, sir. Sometimes it takes time, but it always comes." "Cheap Maid's philosophy." He laughed, but there was tension in the laugh. "Real life is more complex. Sometimes the innocent pay for the guilty. Sometimes the guilty never pay for anything." "Perhaps, sir, but I prefer to believe that in the end truth always wins." "Truth." Daniel repeated the word as if it were a foreign concept. "And what is truth, Emma? What happened, or what we can prove happened?" It was a question loaded with meaning. Emma knew he was testing her, probing if she knew something she shouldn't. "Truth is what really happened, sir, regardless of who believes it or not." Naive. He closed the book forcefully. "Truth is what people with power decide is truth. Everything else is just inconvenience." Emma felt anger burn in her chest but forced herself to stay calm. "Perhaps you're right, sir. I'm always right. Daniel returned behind the desk, reassuming his position of power. "You may go. And remember what we discussed about discretion." "Yes, Mr. Bradford." Emma left the room with measured steps, but as soon as the door closed behind her, she allowed herself a moment of weakness. She leaned against the wall, breathing deeply to control the adrenaline. Every conversation with Daniel was a minefield, every word a potential trap, but it was also an opportunity. He was interested in her, that was obvious. Not romantically, not yet, but there was something about her that intrigued him, and interest could be transformed into other things, things she could use against him. She descended the stairs thinking about the next phase of her plan. The Winter Ball was approaching, a social event that gathered Boston's elite at the Bradford mansion. It would be the perfect opportunity to plant the seeds of destruction, but before that, she needed to know more about the man she intended to destroy. Daniel Bradford wasn't just a spoiled heir. He was intelligent, observant, dangerous. Underestimating him would be a fatal mistake. Emma had spent years planning her revenge, but now she realized she might need a different approach. More subtle, more personal. Perhaps it was time to let him notice her not just as an efficient maid, but as a woman. The idea made her shiver, not from fear, but from a strange anticipation. There was something about Daniel that went beyond the anger she felt for him, something she didn't want to admit even to herself. When she reached the kitchen, she found Mrs. Martha organizing the menu for dinner. The housekeeper raised her eyes, noticing the troubled expression on the young woman's face. "Problems with the master?" she asked with a malicious smile. "No, Mrs. Martha, just... he asked some questions about my previous work." "Ah, yes. He's been suspicious lately. I think someone told him that one of the maids has been snooping where she shouldn't." Emma's blood froze. "Someone said that?" "Just rumors. You know how it is in a big house like this, there's always gossip. But be careful, girl. Mr. Bradford is not a man who forgives indiscretions." Emma nodded, feigning concern. "Thank you for the warning, Mrs. Martha." "You're welcome, dear. Now I need to talk to you about the ball. All the maids will participate this year." "Master's orders." "Participate how?" "Serving, of course, but he wants you all to look presentable. I'll provide dresses for everyone." Emma felt her heart accelerate. The ball, the opportunity she'd been waiting for. What kind of dresses? Simple ones, of course. Nothing that would make you stand out from the guests. After all, a maid's place is in the kitchen, not on the dance floor. "Of course, Mrs. Martha." But while pretending to agree, Emma's mind was already working. The ball would be her chance to approach Daniel differently, to plant the seed of doubt, of curiosity, of desire. Because destroying a man like him wasn't just a matter of exposing his crimes. It was a matter of making him destroy himself from within, and for that she needed him to desire her. That night, when the house finally quieted and all the masters had gone to bed, Emma went to the attic where her room was located. It was a small, stuffy space, furnished with only the essentials. But there, hidden among her few clothes, was her greatest weapon, the dress she would wear to the ball. Not the dress Mrs. Martha would provide, but the dress she had chosen herself, bought with money she had saved for months. A dress that would transform the invisible maid into something Daniel Bradford could never ignore. She held it against her body, observing her reflection in the foggy mirror. It was a deep green, the color of her eyes, the color of her mother's eyes. Elegant, yet provocative. Expensive, but not vulgar. Perfect for a woman who wanted to be noticed for all the wrong reasons. Emma smiled at her reflection. 15 years of waiting were coming to an end. Revenge would be sweet, but it would also be complicated. Because the more time she spent in Daniel Bradford's presence, the more she realized that hating him wasn't as simple as she had imagined. There was something about him that awakened feelings she didn't want to recognize, something that went beyond anger, beyond disdain, beyond the thirst for justice, something that made each encounter a battle not just against him, but against herself. But it didn't matter. Feelings could be controlled, used, transformed into weapons. And if in the end she had to sacrifice her own heart to destroy his, then so be it. After all, some wars require soldiers to die alongside their enemies. And this war had begun long ago on a rainy afternoon, when a 5-year-old girl saw her mother disappear forever into the cold corridors of the Bradford mansion. Now it was time to finish what had begun on that day. The ball would be just the beginning. The morning after the ball dawned grey and heavy, as if Boston's sky itself reflected the tension hanging over the Bradford mansion. Emma woke before her alarm, her body still vibrating with the memory of the previous night's confrontation. Every word exchanged with Daniel, every look, every moment when he had been dangerously close to her, remained etched in her memory with a clarity that frightened her. Something was wrong with her, something she couldn't admit even to herself. For years, she had nurtured hatred like a sacred fire, transforming it into the only reason to continue living. But now, after feeling the warmth of his body so close, after seeing the vulnerability he tried to hide behind his mask of control, hatred was mixing with something far more dangerous. Desire. Not just physical desire, although that was also overwhelmingly present, but the desire to truly know him, to understand the man behind the monster she had created in her mind, and that was a betrayal of everything she had planned. Emma got up from the narrow bed and walked to the small attic window. Below she could see the gardeners already working to clean up the remnants of the party. Broken glasses, crumpled napkins, trampled flower petals. As if the previous night had been just a feverish dream that left only debris behind, but she knew it hadn't been a dream. Something fundamental had changed between her and Daniel, something that could not be undone, and now she had to deal with the consequences. She went down to the kitchen earlier than usual, hoping to find only the cleaning staff. But Mrs. Martha was already there, drinking black coffee and reading a newspaper with a grim expression. "Ah, you," said the housekeeper without raising her eyes. "You've come at the right time. Good morning, Mrs. Martha. Can I help with anything?" "Yes, you can." Martha finally raised her eyes, and Emma saw they were red with fatigue. "You can explain to me what the hell happened last night." Emma's stomach contracted. "I don't understand." "You don't understand?" Martha threw the newspaper on the table. Half the guests left the party talking about the mysterious maid who attracted more attention than the hostess. The other half is speculating about why Mr. Bradford disappeared for a whole hour in the middle of the party. "I didn't. And Robert Caldwell called 3 times this morning asking for information about you. 3 times. Wanting to know your last name, your address, your entire life." Emma felt a wave of disgust. "I hope you didn't give him any information." "Of course I didn't. But that's not the point." Martha stood up, approaching with an expression that mixed concern and irritation. "The point is that you attracted attention, exactly what I warned you not to do. It wasn't my intention." "It wasn't your intention?" Martha laughed bitterly. "Girl, you remade that dress with the precision of a professional designer. You made yourself up like a movie star. You moved through that ballroom as if you owned the house, and you tell me it wasn't your intention to attract attention." Emma lowered her eyes, feigning regret. "Maybe I got carried away." "Carried away?" Martha sighed, rubbing her temples. "Listen, Emma, I like you. You're a good employee, you work well, you don't cause problems, but yesterday you crossed a line." "What line?" "The line that separates us from them. The line that keeps this house functioning. The line that keeps people like you and me employed and not thrown out on the street." "I understand. I hope you do understand, because Mr. Bradford asked to see you in his office as soon as you arrived." Martha studied Emma's face carefully. "And he didn't seem happy." Emma nodded, but inside she felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. "What time?" "Now. He's waiting. Thank you for the warning." Emma left the kitchen with firm steps, but her heart was beating like a war drum. Every meeting with Daniel was a minefield, a dangerous dance where one misstep could destroy everything. But it was also addictive in a way she couldn't explain. She knocked on the office door and waited for the familiar response. "Come in." Daniel was sitting behind the mahogany desk, exactly as she had imagined. But there was something different about him this morning. He wore a white shirt without a tie, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled. He looked younger, more human, more vulnerable, and that made her even more dangerous. "Sit down," he said without raising his eyes from the papers he was reading. Emma sat in the chair in front of the desk, maintaining an upright posture. She could feel the tension emanating from him in almost tangible waves. "Do you know why I called you here?" he asked, finally raising his eyes. "I imagine it's about last night." "Yes." "About last night?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her blood boil. "About the spectacle you made." "It wasn't my intention to make any spectacle." "It wasn't." He laughed, but the laugh was tense. Then explain to me why I received 5 phone calls this morning from men interested in getting to know my maid better. I can't control people's reactions. You can't? Daniel got up and walked to the window, hands crossed behind his back. You know exactly the effect you cause. Last night was calculated, every detail planned to cause maximum impact. Why would I do that? That's the question I'm asking. He turned to her, his eyes shining with a dangerous intensity. Why would a maid go to the trouble of causing such a commotion? Why risk her job, her safety, her reputation? Maybe I got carried away. Lie. Daniel approached the desk, leaning on it with both hands. You're not the type to get carried away. You're calculating, observant, intelligent. Everything you did was deliberate. And if it was, what does that change? It changes everything. He walked around to stand behind her chair, so close she could feel the heat of his body. Because now I need to know what you really want. Maybe I just want to be noticed. By me? The question carried so much weight that Emma felt the air leave her lungs. Not necessarily. Lie. Daniel put his hands on the back of the chair, trapping her between his arms. You wanted my attention, you got it. Now tell me why. Maybe because you're an interesting man. Interesting. He laughed, but the laugh was harsh. You think I'm interesting? Or do you think I'm powerful? Both. And what do you intend to do with this attraction? Emma turned in the chair to face him, a movement that left them dangerously close. I don't intend to do anything. No. Daniel leaned slightly, invading her personal space even more. Then why do I feel like you're trying to seduce me? Am I? You are. His voice was hoarse now, charged with a tension that went beyond anger. And it's working. Does that bother you? It should bother me. He raised his hand and lightly touched her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. It should bother me that a maid makes me lose control. But it doesn't bother you. No, and that's what worries me most. Emma felt her heart race. Why? Because I don't usually lose control. Never. Daniel abruptly moved away, walking to the window again. You make me feel things I shouldn't feel. Think things I shouldn't think. What kind of things? Dangerous things. Things that could destroy everything I've built. Maybe some things deserve to be destroyed. Daniel turned to her with an expression that mixed surprise and suspicion. What kind of thing is that for a maid to say? I'm not a common maid. No, you're not. He walked back to the desk but kept his distance. And that's the part that makes me uneasy. Who are you really, Emma? I've already told you, nobody important. Lie. Daniel sat on the edge of the desk, his eyes fixed on her. You're too educated to be an ordinary maid. You speak in a very articulate way. You have knowledge you shouldn't have. What knowledge? Knowledge about this house, about my family, about things that shouldn't be of interest to you. Emma's blood froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Daniel stood up and walked to a file cabinet in the corner of the room. I had your background investigated, Emma. Do you know what I found? No. Practically nothing. He opened a drawer and took out a thin folder. Emma Collins, 20 years old, born in Boston, orphaned since the age of 5, raised by distant aunts. Worked in 3 different houses in the last 2 years. Impeccable references, but vague. And what's wrong with that? Everything. Daniel threw the folder on the desk. Because real people leave traces. They have friends, they have history, they have connections. You don't have any of that. It's as if you emerged from nowhere specifically to work here. Some people prefer to keep their private life private. Yes, they do. But you're not keeping your private life private. You're hiding who you are. And why would I do that? That's the question that keeps me awake at night. Daniel approached her again, but this time there was something predatory in his movements. Why would someone go to the trouble of creating a false identity to work as a maid? My identity isn't false. No. Then why can't I find any record of you before 2 years ago? Why are your references, when checked, too vague to be true? Emma forced herself to remain calm. Maybe I'm not very memorable. You are many things, Emma. But memorable is definitely one of them. Daniel leaned over the desk, placing his hands on either side of her, especially to men. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're not a virgin. You're not innocent. There's something in your eyes, in the way you move, that suggests experience. Experience with what? With men, with seduction, with getting what you want. His eyes narrowed. The question is, what do you want from me? Maybe I just want what any woman wants from a powerful man. Which would be security, protection, a better life. Lie. Daniel backed away, but kept his eyes fixed on her. You're not motivated by greed. There's something deeper, something personal. Personal like what? Like revenge. The word fell between them like a bomb. Emma felt the world stop for a moment, but forced herself to maintain a neutral expression. Revenge? Yes, revenge. Daniel walked around to stand behind her chair again. You have the look of someone who has been hurt, someone who wants to settle scores. Settle scores with whom? With me, with my family, with everything we represent. Why would I want that? Because we hurt you, or hurt someone you loved. Daniel put his hands on her shoulders, and Emma felt the heat burn through the fabric. The question is, who? And when? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Daniel leaned down, his lips close to her ear. Then why are you trembling? Emma realized he was right. Her body was betraying her emotions, reacting to his proximity in a way that went beyond fear. I'm trembling because you're scaring me. Lie. His voice was hoarse, charged with a tension that made the air seem electrified. You're trembling for the same reason I am. What reason? Because there's something between us. Something that shouldn't exist but does. Daniel raised his hands and touched her neck, his fingers brushing her sensitive skin. Something that's becoming impossible to ignore. Mr. Bradford. Daniel. His voice was a whisper now. When we're alone, you can call me Daniel. I don't think that's appropriate. Appropriate? He laughed, but the laugh was tense. Nothing about this is appropriate. Nothing about what I feel for you is appropriate. What do you feel for me? Things I shouldn't feel. Things that could destroy me. Daniel abruptly moved away, walking to the window again. You make me forget who I am. You make me forget the rules I've always followed. Maybe it's time to break some rules. Break rules? He turned to her, his eyes shining with a dangerous intensity. Do you know what the price of breaking rules is in my world? No. Destruction. Complete and total. Daniel walked back to her but kept his distance. I could give you everything. Money, jewelry, a life you never imagined. But I could also destroy you just as easily. And what's to stop me from destroying you first? The question came out before she could control herself. Daniel studied her with an intensity that made her blood freeze. Interesting, he murmured. Very interesting. I didn't mean that. Didn't you? Daniel approached slowly, like a predator circling its prey. Or was it the first honest thing you've said since you arrived here? I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You came here with a purpose, not to work, not to earn money, but for something much more specific. He stopped right in front of her. You came here to destroy me. That's ridiculous. Is it? Daniel leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of the chair, trapping her. Then why do I feel like you know secrets about me that I've never told anyone? Maybe because I'm not as invisible as you think. No, you're not. His eyes narrowed. You observe, you listen, you learn, and you use what you learn against me. Against you how? By making me want things I shouldn't want. By making me feel things I shouldn't feel. Daniel leaned in even closer, so that their faces were inches apart. By making me lose control. And that bothers you? It should bother me, but it doesn't. What bothers me is that you know exactly what you're doing. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm as lost as you are. Lost? Daniel raised his hand and touched her face, his thumb brushing her lips. You're not lost. You know exactly where you are and what you want. And what do I want? Justice. Revenge. Maybe both. His eyes fixed on her lips. But you also want me. And that's complicating your plans. What plans? The plans you made to destroy me. The plans that started to crumble the moment I felt your breathing quicken when I got close. Emma tried to move away, but he prevented her, keeping her trapped in the chair. No, he murmured. Don't run away. Not now. Mr. Bradford. Daniel. His voice was a hoarse whisper. Say my name. Daniel. The word came out like a sigh. Like that. He leaned in even closer so that their lips almost touched. Now tell me the truth. Who are you? The sound of the door opening made them jump. Daniel immediately moved away, turning to see who had entered. It was Mrs. Martha, carrying a coffee tray. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Bradford, but I brought the coffee you requested. Her eyes moved between Daniel and Emma, noticing the tension in the air. Thank you, Martha. You can leave it on the desk. Yes, sir. Martha placed the tray on the desk, but hesitated. Do you need anything else? No, you may go. When Martha left, closing the door behind her, Daniel turned to Emma. But the moment had broken. Reality had returned, bringing with it all the complications they were trying to ignore. I think our conversation is over for now, he said, his voice formal again. Yes. Emma stood up, smoothing her uniform. May I go? You may, but Emma... She stopped at the door without turning. This isn't over. Not between us. No. And when I find out who you really are, and I will find out, I hope you're prepared for the consequences. I will be. I hope so. Because when the truth comes out, there will be nowhere to hide. Emma left the room with trembling legs, but not from fear, from something much more dangerous, desire. Desire to go back, to continue the game, to see how far they could go before everything collapsed. But she also knew that time was running out. Daniel was suspicious, investigating, coming dangerously close to the truth. She needed to accelerate her plans. That afternoon, taking advantage of Daniel having left for a business meeting, Emma returned to the office. There was something she needed to check, something that had been bothering her since the morning conversation. He had said he had investigated her past and found almost nothing. But if he had managed to find some information, where were the files? And more importantly, what else had he discovered that he hadn't mentioned? The desk was tidy as always, but Emma noticed something different. A drawer that had always been locked was now slightly open. Curious, she pulled it out completely. Inside, she found a folder with her name. Her heart raced when she saw the contents. Photos of her, some taken without her knowledge. Information about her previous jobs more detailed than she expected. And at the end, a photo that made her blood freeze. It was a photo of her mother. Teresa Collins, said the caption, employed by the Bradford family from 1998 to 2004, died at age 28 of pneumonia. But that wasn't all. There was a handwritten note on the side in Daniel's handwriting. Notable physical resemblance. Investigate connection. Emma felt the world spin. He suspected. Maybe he didn't know exactly who she was yet, but he was getting close. Very close. She continued leafing through the folder and found something that made her break into a cold sweat. A copy of her mother's birth certificate with a note, check if Teresa Collins had children. Emma Collins could be daughter. Underneath, another document that almost made her faint. A private investigation order, dated 2 days ago, requesting detailed information about any connection between Emma Collins and Teresa Collins, former employee of the Bradford family. He was investigating thoroughly. In a matter of days, perhaps hours, he would discover the truth. Emma closed the folder with trembling hands. She needed to act quickly, very quickly, before he discovered who she was, before he could defend himself, before he could make her disappear as he had done with her mother. But first, she needed to know exactly what had happened to Teresa. She needed the details that the Bradford family had tried so hard to hide. She left the office and went up to the attic, where she kept her only truly important possessions. At the bottom of an old suitcase wrapped in cloth was the only thing that remained of her mother, a diary. Emma had found it years before, hidden among the things her aunts had kept. She hadn't been able to read it all at the time. She was too young to understand some things. But now, with everything she had learned, perhaps she could find the answers she needed. She opened the diary to the last entry, dated a week before Teresa's death. I can't bear to live with this weight anymore. I know I'm in danger, but I can't remain silent any longer. What I've seen, what I know, is too serious to be ignored. Richard Bradford is not just a man of questionable business dealings, he is a monster. And if anything happens to me, I need to leave evidence so that one day perhaps the truth will come to light. Emma needs to know. When she grows up, when she's strong enough, she needs to know that her mother died trying to do the right thing. She needs to know that the Bradfords aren't just rich, they're criminals, and she needs to know that she's the only one who can stop them. I've hidden everything in a place only she will know to find. The photos, the documents, the recordings, everything is there, waiting for the day when she'll be strong enough to use it. Emma closed the diary, her heart beating erratically. Recordings. Her mother had made recordings, and she had hidden them in a place only she would know to find. There was only one place that made sense. The room she had occupied as a child, upstairs in the mansion. The room that was now used as storage, but which had once been her refuge. She waited until the house quieted, until all the employees went to bed. Then, she silently descended the stairs and headed for her old room. The door was locked, but Emma knew where Mrs. Martha kept the keys. She entered the room she hadn't seen in 15 years, feeling tears burn her eyes. There were still some marks of her childhood. A scratch on the wall where she had tried to write her name, a stain on the carpet where she had spilled paint, and in the corner covered by old sheets, the wardrobe where she used to hide when her mother worked. Emma went to the wardrobe and began to search. She ran her hands along the inner walls, looking for something that shouldn't be there. Then she found it, a loose board at the bottom of the wardrobe. When she lifted it, it revealed a small hiding place. Inside, exactly as her mother had promised, was everything. Photos of documents, records of conversations, and most importantly, a small digital recorder with hours of recordings. Emma picked up the recorder with trembling hands and pressed play. Her mother's voice, which she hadn't heard in 15 years, filled the silent room. This is recording number 1. Date, March 15, 2004. Today I witnessed a conversation between Richard Bradford and his associates about the disappearance of 3 underage girls. They didn't run away. They were sold. And Richard knows where to. Emma felt the world spin. Her mother had discovered something much worse than financial corruption. She had discovered a human trafficking network. She continued listening, each word revealing horrors she could barely imagine. Her mother had risked her life to document crimes that the Bradford family had committed, crimes that went far beyond what she had imagined. And at the end of the last recording, Teresa's voice was laden with tears. If anything happens to me, I know it will be their fault. They discovered that I know. Richard called me into his office today and threatened me. He said, people like me shouldn't meddle in matters they don't understand. But I do understand. I understand that they are monsters. And I understand that my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where monsters like them don't exist. Emma, if you're listening to this, it means you succeeded. It means you're strong enough to face them. Use these recordings. Use everything I left for you, and make them pay. Not just for me, but for all the people they destroyed. Emma turned off the recorder, tears streaming down her face. Now she knew the complete truth. Her mother hadn't died just for discovering corruption. She had died for trying to expose a network of crimes that included human trafficking, murders, and horrors she couldn't even imagine. And Daniel was complicit in all this. Maybe not directly, but he certainly knew. He had to know. She put away the recordings and documents, her heart burning with renewed anger, but also with something more complicated. Doubt. Was the man who had almost kissed her that morning the same one who participated in a network of horrors? There was only one way to find out. When she returned to the attic, she found an envelope that had been slid under her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in Daniel's handwriting. I know who you are. I know what you want. Meet me in the library at midnight. Let's finish this once and for all. Emma looked at the clock. It was 11:45. 15 minutes until the confrontation that would determine the fate of both of them. 15 minutes to discover if the man she was beginning to feel something for was the monster who had destroyed her family. 15 minutes to decide whether to continue with revenge or follow her heart. But one thing was certain. After that night, there would be no more lies between them, no more masks, just the raw, brutal truth that could destroy them both. Emma put the recorder away, put on a coat and headed for the library. It was time to face her destiny. The Bradford Mansion's library was a sanctuary of silence and shadows, where mahogany bookshelves rose from floor to ceiling like sentinels guarding ancient secrets. The aroma of old leather and yellowed paper permeated the air, mingling with the scent of gardenias growing outside the French windows. It was almost midnight when Emma pushed open the heavy wooden doors, each creak echoing like an omen in the darkness. Daniel was there as he had promised, but he wasn't the same controlled man she had known over the past months. This Daniel was leaning against the unlit fireplace, his jacket thrown over a leather armchair, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up, his hair disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. He held a glass of whiskey, but it appeared untouched. His eyes, when they met hers, shone with an intensity that went beyond anger or desire. It was something deeper, more desperate. "You came," he said, his husky voice breaking the silence. "You asked." "Asked." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in the laugh. "I begged, without realizing it, but I begged." Emma closed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the library like a final sentence. "You said you knew who I was." "I do." He put the glass on the table without drinking. "Teresa Collins, your mother. Worked here for 6 years from 1998 to 2004. Officially died of pneumonia in a private clinic." Daniel paused, his eyes fixed on her. "But we both know it wasn't pneumonia that killed her." Emma's heart raced, but she maintained a neutral expression. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop." The word came out like a command, loaded with a pain she hadn't expected to hear. "Stop lying. Stop pretending. Stop torturing me with this charade." "Torturing?" "Yes, torturing." Daniel moved away from the fireplace, walking until he was a few feet from her. "Do you think I don't know what you're doing? Do you think I don't realize how each of your glances is calculated to remind me of her? Her? Your mother." His voice lowered to a harsh whisper. "You have the same eyes, the same way of tilting your head when you're nervous, the same way of smiling when you're lying." Emma felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So what? What does that change?" "It changes everything," Daniel exploded, his control finally crumbling. "It changes that you're not just a maid who intrigues me. You're the daughter of the woman who what?" Emma stepped forward, her voice charged with an anger she had been holding for 15 years. "Who you killed. Who you silenced because she knew too much. Who you made disappear because she threatened to expose the Bradford family's crimes." "No," the word echoed through the library with desperate force. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't." Emma laughed, but the laugh was soaked in pain. "Then explain to me how it was. Explain to me how a 28-year-old woman, perfectly healthy, suddenly dies of pneumonia right after confronting your father about things she had discovered. You don't understand?" "I understand perfectly." Emma took the small recorder from her pocket, placing it on the table between them. "I understand because she left this for me. Hours of recordings documenting every crime she witnessed, every conversation she heard, every horror your family committed." Daniel looked at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. "Where did you find that?" "In the place where she hid it. In the room that was mine until I was 5. Until the day I saw my mother being dragged down the stairs of this house never to return." "Emma?" "No." She pressed play, and Teresa's voice filled the library. "Listen. Listen to the voice of the woman you killed." The recording began to play, and Emma saw Daniel's face pale with each word. When it reached the part about human trafficking, about the missing girls, about crimes that went far beyond financial corruption, he collapsed into an armchair as if his legs could no longer support him. "God," he murmured, burying his face in his hands. I didn't know it was so monstrous." Emma turned off the recorder, her voice trembling with anger. "Your family isn't just corrupt, Daniel. You're criminals, murderers, traffickers, and my mother died trying to expose that. My father—" Daniel raised his face, and Emma saw tears in his eyes. "My father told me she had tried to blackmail him, that she had made up stories to get money, that she had died of natural causes. And you believed him. I was young. I was 23. I trusted my father. I respected him. I thought—" Daniel stood up, walking to the window. "I thought he was protecting me from something sordid. I didn't imagine that he was the sordid one. But you knew something was wrong. You must have known." "I knew there were irregularities, questionable business dealings, but not this. Never this." Daniel turned to her, his eyes shining with desperate intensity. "You have to believe me. I didn't know about the trafficking. I didn't know about the girls. I didn't know your mother had been killed." "Killed how?" Daniel hesitated, as if the words were poison in his mouth. "I found files after my father's death. Records he kept hidden. Your mother didn't die of pneumonia. She was poisoned, slowly, to look like natural illness." The confirmation hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. As much as she knew, as much as she suspected, hearing the truth was different. "Who?" "My father. He himself. I discovered the recipe he used, the symptoms he wanted to simulate. I discovered that she was kept in a private clinic where he had total control over the treatment. And you did nothing? He was already dead, Daniel exploded again. He died 2 years before I discovered the truth. There was nothing I could do. Yes, there was. Emma approached him, her voice low and dangerous. You could have come looking for me. You could have told me the truth. You could have asked for my forgiveness. Forgiveness? Daniel laughed bitterly. Forgiveness for what? For being born a Bradford? For inheriting my father's sins? For being too cowardly to investigate sooner? For letting my mother die alone? For allowing me to grow up thinking I had been abandoned? For continuing to live a life of luxury built on the blood of innocent people? Do you think it was easy? Daniel came closer to her, his eyes shining with a pain she hadn't expected to see. Do you think I didn't torture myself with this? That I didn't spend sleepless nights imagining how many other people my father destroyed? But you did nothing to make amends, didn't I? Daniel walked to a bookshelf, taking out several files. In the last 5 years, I've donated more than 50 million to organizations that combat human trafficking. I closed all the questionable operations I inherited. I fired all the employees who knew about my father's crimes and did nothing. Money doesn't bring my mother back. No, nothing brings her back. Daniel approached her again, his voice laden with a vulnerability she had never seen. But I tried. I tried to be different from him. I tried to build something clean over the ruins of what he left. And that should make me forgive you? No. Nothing should make you forgive me. I'm a Bradford. I carry the blood of a murderer. I inherited a fortune built on suffering. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. Then why are you here? Why did you come to work in my house? Why didn't you just expose me from the beginning? Emma hesitated. The question touched on the heart of her own contradictions. Because exposure isn't justice. Because I wanted you to suffer first. I wanted you to feel what it's like to lose everything. And now that you have the evidence, now that you can completely destroy me, now, Emma felt her voice falter. Now, I don't know anymore. You don't know? No. Tears finally began to stream down her face. Because the man I came to destroy isn't the monster I imagined. He's someone who carries the pain of his father's sins. He's someone who tried to be better. He's someone who what? Who I'm beginning to love. The confession came out as a desperate whisper. And that's killing me inside. Daniel stood motionless for a moment, as if the words needed time to penetrate his consciousness. You love me? I shouldn't. I don't want to. But, Emma sobbed, the anger and pain finally overflowing. But when you touch me, when you look at me, when you talk to me as if I were more than a maid, I forget why I came here. I forget about revenge. I forget everything except how you make me feel. And how do I make you feel? Alive. The word came out loaded with brutal honesty. For the first time in 15 years. Alive. Daniel approached slowly as if she were a wild animal that might flee at any moment. You know this is impossible. I know. That it can't work. I know. That we are enemies by nature. I know. Emma raised her eyes to meet his. But I also know that you feel the same way I do. Yes. The admission came out like a groan of pain. God help me, but yes. So what do we do now? Daniel raised his hand, touching her tear-stained face. I don't know. For the first time in my life, I don't know. I don't either. Maybe. Daniel hesitated, as if the words were too dangerous to be uttered. Maybe we can figure it out together. Together? Yes, you and me. Against the world, against logic, against everything that separates us. You're crazy. Completely. Daniel leaned in, his forehead touching hers. But I'd rather be crazy with you than sane without you. Daniel, say yes. Say you'll try. Say we can find a way to overcome this. How? How can we overcome the fact that your family killed my mother? I don't know. But I know I won't be able to live without you. Not now that I know who you are. Not now that I know why you intrigued me from the first moment. Why? Because you are her. You are Teresa, but better, stronger, smarter, more beautiful. Daniel touched her lips with his thumb. You are everything she was, but without the innocence that made her vulnerable. I'm not my mother. No, you're much more. You are vengeance and passion. You are strength and vulnerability. You are the woman who can destroy me or save me. And which do you prefer? Both. I want you to destroy me and rebuild me. I want you to love me and hate me. I want you to be my downfall and my redemption. You're asking too much. I'm asking for everything. Daniel leaned in more, his lips almost touching hers. Because you are everything to me. Daniel, say yes. Say you'll try. And if we can't, if the weight of the past is too much, then at least we tried. At least we don't spend the rest of our lives wondering what could have been. Emma closed her eyes, feeling his breath against her lips. This is madness. Yes, it will go wrong. Probably. It will destroy us. Maybe. Then why? Because I love you. The confession interrupted her words. I've loved you since the first day, even without knowing who you were. I love you for the way you challenge me, how you make me want to be better. I love you for the strength you have, for the intelligence you use against me. I love you because you're the only person who can truly see me and still not run away. I should run away. You should. But will you? Emma opened her eyes, finding his gaze fixed on her. No. God help me, but no. Then stay. Stay with me. Let me try to make up for what my father did. Let me try to build something new over the ruins of what I inherited. How? Together. You and me. Using the evidence your mother left to end what remains of my father's network. Using our story to help other people who suffered like you both did. You would do that? I would do anything to have you in my life. Anything to prove that I'm different from him. And if we discover that you're not, if we discover that Bradford blood is stronger than your desire for change, then you stop me. You remind me of who I want to be. You keep me human. That's a lot of responsibility. It's the only responsibility I want. Emma studied him for a long moment, seeing beyond the mask of control he always wore. Seeing the man who was trying to be better than his blood, better than his inheritance, better than his name. All right, she finally whispered. All right? I'll try. I'll stay. I'll see if we can build something from this chaos. Emma, but with conditions. Anything. First, no more lies, ever. No matter how painful the truth is. I agree. Second, you'll help me understand everything. Every crime, every victim, every horror your family committed. I can't love you completely without completely understanding what you're trying to overcome. I agree. Third, if at any point I decide this can't work, that the weight of the past is too much, you let me go. Without trying to convince me, without trying to blackmail me, without trying to follow me. Daniel hesitated. That's the hardest one, but it's the most important. All right, I agree. Then, Emma leaned in slightly. Seal the deal. How? Kiss me. Kiss me for real. Not as master and servant, not as enemies, but as us, whoever we are. Daniel needed no further invitation. He held her face between his hands and kissed her with an intensity that took her breath away. It wasn't the furious, desperate kiss she had expected. It was gentle, almost reverent, as if he were kissing something sacred. Emma felt all the hatred she had carried for 15 years begin to dissolve, replaced by something much more complicated. Love, yes, but also forgiveness. Not forgiveness for the crimes, but forgiveness for the man who was trying to be better than his sins. When they separated, both were breathless. What happens now? She asked. Now we start from scratch. Not as master and servant, not as Bradford and Collins, but as Daniel and Emma. Two people trying to build something good over something terrible. And if someone finds out, they will. But I don't care. Let them talk, let them speculate, let them condemn. You're worth more than any reputation I might have. Daniel, I know. It's frightening. It's risky. It's probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had seen on his face. But it's also the only right thing I've ever done. So we do this. We try. We try. Daniel kissed her again, and this time Emma allowed herself to get lost in the moment. She allowed herself to forget, just for a few minutes, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. She allowed herself to be just a woman loving a man, no matter how complicated that love was. When they separated again, he picked up the recorder from the table. What do you want to do with this? Use it, but not against you. against what remains of your father's network, against the people who are still out there, still committing crimes, still hurting people. Together? Together. It will be dangerous. These people won't like being exposed. Let them dislike it. I've lived in fear long enough. And if they try to hurt you, then you protect me. And I protect you. Partners? Partners? Daniel smiled again, and Emma realized she could become addicted to that smile. You know this will scandalize Boston society, don't you? Let it scandalize. They'll say you're an opportunist who seduced the Bradford heir. Let them say it, I know the truth. What is the truth? That you're the man who made me believe in love again. That you're the man who made me want to build instead of destroy. That you're the man who made me realize that revenge is much less powerful than forgiveness. And you? You're the woman who made me want to be better, who made me want to honor your mother's memory instead of just carrying the shame of my father, who made me believe that perhaps I can be redeemed. We can redeem ourselves together, together. They kissed again, and this time it was different. There was no more desperation, no more anger, no more fear. There was only promise. The promise that, against all odds, they would try to make this work. When they finally separated, it was almost 2 in the morning. The library was illuminated only by the moonlight entering through the French windows, creating shadows that danced across the bookshelves. I should go, Emma said, though she didn't want to. I know. But first, Daniel went to the desk and took a key. This is to my apartment downtown. I want you to have it. Daniel? Not as a lover, not yet, but as a person who deserves to have a safe place, a place that's yours. I can't accept that. Yes, you can, because it's not charity, it's justice. It's the least I can do to start making up for what my family took from you. Emma took the key, feeling the cold weight of the metal against her palm. Thank you. Don't thank me, just use it. Go there when you want to be alone, when you want to think, when you want to remember that now you have choices. And you? Where will you stay? Here, at least for now. I have a lot of work to do, many files to review, many crimes to undo. Alone? No. You'll help me. When you're ready. I'm ready now. No. Now you need to process all of this. You need to be sure this is what you want. You need to be sure you can separate the man I am from the man my father was. I already can. Are you sure? Emma studied him for a moment, seeing beyond the handsome face, beyond the natural elegance, beyond the power that emanated from him. Seeing the man who chose to be better every day, who carried the weight of his father's sins but refused to repeat the mistakes. I'm sure. Then tomorrow we begin. Tomorrow we begin to build something new. Tomorrow. Emma headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. Daniel? Yes? Thank you. For listening to me. For believing me. For choosing to be different. Thank you for giving me the chance to be different. Always. When Emma finally left the library, her heart was lighter than it had been in 15 years. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because now she had company to carry it. Not because the crimes had been erased, but because now there was hope for real justice. And when she climbed the stairs to the attic, for the first time since she had arrived at the Bradford mansion, she wasn't planning revenge. She was planning a future that seemed impossible, but that perhaps, just perhaps, could work. A future built on love instead of hatred, on forgiveness instead of revenge, on hope instead of despair. A future that her mother, wherever she was, might approve of, because in the end, Teresa Collins hadn't died just to expose crimes. She had died so that her daughter could have a better life, and perhaps, finally, Emma was ready to live that life, even if it was alongside a Bradford. The 3 days following the revelation in the library passed like a strange dance of reconstruction. Emma woke each morning in the attic, put on the grey uniform, and went down to fulfill her duties as a maid. But now there was something fundamentally different in the air. Every glance exchanged with Daniel carried the weight of their new truth. Every word spoken in the presence of other employees had to be carefully measured to avoid revealing the storm that had unleashed between them. During the day they were master and servant. At night they were conspirators united by a common goal, dismantling what remained of the criminal network that Daniel's father had built. On the first night after the confession, Emma had gone down to the office at 11 o'clock, finding Daniel surrounded by piles of documents, open folders, and files that seemed endless. He raised his eyes when she entered, and for a moment neither knew how to act. The intimacy of the library seemed like a distant dream in the face of the harsh reality of the crimes they needed to confront. "Where do we start?" she had asked, breaking the silence. "With the worst," Daniel replied, pushing a folder toward her. "With the children." Emma opened the folder and felt her stomach turn. Photographs, documents, transaction records, boys and girls who had disappeared over the years, sold as merchandise to international exploitation networks. Their faces stared at her from the yellowed pages, innocent eyes that didn't know the fate that awaited them. "How many?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "From what I've been able to reconstruct, maybe 200 over 15 years. My God. Some were saved. I managed to track about 40 who were found and returned to their families. But the others," Daniel ran his hands through his hair, "the others simply disappeared into the system. And those responsible? My father died, taking most of the names with him, but not all." Daniel opened another file. "I've identified 5 people who are still alive, still in positions of power, still potentially active. That was how they had spent the nights, immersed in horrors, trying to connect dots, identify victims, trace escape routes for criminals who thought they were safe. The work was exhausting, emotionally devastating, but also curiously healing. Each crime exposed was a small victory for Teresa's memory. Each connection discovered was a step toward justice. But it wasn't just the work that was changing between them. There were moments, small and precious, when the reality of the crimes receded, and they were simply Daniel and Emma. Moments when he brought coffee and stood watching as she studied a document, his eyes more focused on her face than on the paper. Moments when she stood up to get something from a high shelf and felt his hands automatically position themselves at her waist to stabilize her. Accidental touches that lasted a second longer than necessary. Looks that lingered until one of them forced themselves to look away. Conversations that started about evidence and ended about dreams, fears, hopes that neither had shared with anyone else. "Have you ever wanted to have children?" Emma had asked on the second night, when they were reviewing files on illegal adoptions. "Not until recently," Daniel replied, without taking his eyes off the document he was reading. "I always thought I would be a terrible father, that I would repeat my father's mistakes. And now, he finally raised his eyes. Now I think perhaps I could learn. With the right teacher." "What kind of teacher?" "Someone who understands what it's like to grow up without an adequate father figure. Someone who knows the importance of protecting the innocent." Daniel paused. "Someone who could teach me to be the kind of man who deserves to be a father." "And me? Do you think I could be a mother?" "You would be an extraordinary mother. Fierce, protective, loving. Any child would be lucky to have you, even being the daughter of a dead maid, especially for being the daughter of a woman who died trying to protect children." Daniel got up and walked to where she was sitting. "Emma, do you understand that I don't care about your origins? That I actually feel honored that you've given me the chance to know the truth. Sometimes it's hard to believe that. Why? Because I grew up hearing that people like me weren't important, that we were disposable, that it didn't matter what happened to us because no one cared enough to ask. I care. I know, but—" Emma hesitated. "Sometimes I'm afraid you'll change your mind. That you'll wake up one day and realize you're trying to have a relationship with the daughter of a dead maid. Never." Daniel knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "I will never change my mind, because you're not just the daughter of a dead maid. You're the daughter of the bravest woman I've ever known. You're the woman who made me want to be better. You're the person who made me believe in redemption. Daniel, I love you, not despite your origins, but because of everything you are, because of your strength, your intelligence, your compassion, because of the way you challenge me and inspire me at the same time. I love you too. Then stop worrying about what others will think. Stop worrying about what's appropriate or inappropriate. Focus only on what's true. What is true? That we both deserve to be happy, that we deserve a chance to build something beautiful over something terrible, that we deserve love." It was in these conversations that Emma felt the last vestige of her anger dissolve. Not anger about the crimes that remained, but anger toward Daniel. It was impossible to maintain hatred for a man who opened up to her with such vulnerability, who worked so tirelessly to undo the evils he had inherited. But her new happiness didn't go unnoticed. Mrs. Martha had begun to make comments about the glow in Emma's eyes, about how she seemed different lately. Other employees whispered when she passed, noticing subtle changes in her behavior, in the way she moved through the house. And then, on the third night, everything changed. Emma was in the office with Daniel, organizing evidence they planned to deliver to the FBI the next morning when they heard the sound of cars arriving at the gate. It wasn't unusual for Daniel to receive visitors late at night, but there was something different about the sound. More cars than normal, engines that didn't turn off, doors slamming forcefully. "Are you expecting someone?" Emma asked. "No." Daniel stood up, walking to the window. What he saw made his face pale. "Hide the documents. Now." "What's happening?" "Robert Caldwell is here. With 3 cars. And at least 6 men." Emma felt her blood freeze. Caldwell, the businessman who had tried to harass her at the ball, was one of the names they had identified as still active in the network. They had discovered that he continued operating trafficking routes, using legitimate companies as a front. Does he know we're investigating? He must know. Or suspect. Daniel quickly began gathering the most important documents. Someone might have talked, or he might have realized we're asking questions. What do we do? "You leave here, now, through the back door. Go to the apartment I gave you the key to." "I won't leave you alone." "Emma, these men aren't civilized businessmen, they're desperate criminals. If they suspect we have evidence against them, they're capable of anything. Then come with me." "I can't. If I run, they'll know they have reason to worry. I have to face them, pretend I don't know anything." "And if they hurt you?" "They won't. Not here. Not in my house. It would be too obvious." Daniel took her face in his hands. "But you're a threat they can eliminate without consequences. You're just a maid who disappeared. No one would ask questions. Daniel, go. Please, go and wait for me to contact you. And if you don't, I will. But if I don't within 48 hours, take the copies of the documents that are in the apartment safe and take everything to the FBI. Tell the whole story. Don't worry about me. I can't do that." "Yes, you can, because that's what your mother would do. That's what she would want you to do." Daniel kissed her quickly. "Now go, before it's too late." Emma took a small folder with the most important evidence and left through the back door, her heart beating like a war drum. She managed to reach the back gate without being seen, but when she turned to take one last look at the mansion, she saw lights coming on throughout the house. Caldwell and his men had entered. The journey to the downtown apartment passed like a blur. Emma drove one of the smaller cars from the Bradford fleet, the one Daniel had said she could use whenever she needed. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. The apartment was in an elegant building in the Beacon Hill area with a view of downtown Boston. When Emma entered, she was struck by the intimacy of the space. It wasn't large, but it was clearly personal. Books scattered on the coffee table, photographs of places Daniel had visited, a guitar leaning against the wall. There was also something she hadn't expected, photographs of her. They weren't invasive or secret photos, but images he had taken discreetly over the past few days. Emma smiling while reading a document, Emma concentrating, writing notes, Emma looking out the window with a thoughtful expression. She realized he had been documenting her presence in his life, creating a visual archive of their moments together. It was both touching and frightening. Touching for the obviousness of his affection, frightening for the intensity of his observation. Emma sat on the sofa, hugging a pillow that smelled of his cologne, and waited. She looked at the phone every 2 minutes, waiting for it to ring. She checked the windows, expecting to see suspicious cars on the street. She went through the evidence she had brought, trying to distract herself with work, but mostly she worried. At 4 in the morning, when the phone finally rang, she almost jumped off the sofa. "Hello? It's me." Daniel's voice was hoarse, tired, but alive. "Are you all right?" "Yes, and you?" "I'm fine, but we have problems." "What kind of problems?" "Caldwell knows we're investigating. He doesn't know exactly what, but he knows there's something. He made me a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "He wants me to become his partner, to use my influence and my contacts to expand the operations." Daniel paused. "He said it would be a shame if something happened to people I value." "He threatened you?" "Indirectly. But he also threatened you. He said he knew I had a fixation on a maid and that maids have a habit of disappearing. Emma felt her blood freeze. What did you say? That I didn't know what he was talking about, that you were just an efficient employee. Daniel sighed. But he didn't believe it. He knows there's something between us. So what do? We accelerate everything. We deliver the evidence tomorrow, no matter if it's complete or not. We can't wait any longer. And then? Then maybe we'll have to disappear for a while until they're arrested. Disappear how? I have a house in the countryside, in a small town that nobody knows. We can go there, wait for the situation to calm down. Together, if you want, if you're willing to bet your life on me. Emma closed her eyes. I already have, since the first night. Then get ready. Come pick me up at the mansion at 6 in the morning. We'll go together to deliver the evidence in, Daniel. Yes, I love you. I love you too. And I promise we'll get through this. Promise? I promise. When Emma hung up the phone, she knew she had crossed a definitive line. There was no going back. They were in this together, for better or worse. And for the first time since she had arrived at the Bradford mansion, she was genuinely frightened. Not for herself, but for him. For them. For everything they had built that could be destroyed by men who had no scruples. She spent the rest of the early morning organizing the evidence, preparing copies, making sure that no matter what happened, the truth would survive. When the sun began to rise over Boston, she was ready to face whatever came, ready to fight for her love, for justice, for a future. Ready to finish what her mother had started. At 6 o'clock sharp, Emma was in front of the Bradford mansion. Daniel came out immediately, carrying 2 suitcases and a bulky folder. He seemed to have aged years in one night, but his eyes still shone with determination. Is it all there? She asked, indicating the folder. Everything. 15 years of documented crimes. Names, dates, places, victims, everything we need to end this. And if it's not enough? It will be enough, it has to be. Daniel put the suitcases in the back seat. Are you ready? I am. Then let's go. Let's finish this. The journey to the FBI headquarters was tense. Emma drove while Daniel kept an eye out for cars that might be following them. There was no suspicious traffic, but they both knew that didn't mean they were safe. Are you sure we can trust this agent? Emma asked as they were arriving. Agent Johnson is one of the few honest men I know. If anyone can act on this evidence, it's him. And if Caldwell has contacts inside the FBI, he might. But Johnson has a team he trusts. And once the evidence is officially registered, it will be very difficult to make it disappear. They parked in front of the FBI building, both hesitating before getting out of the car. It was the moment of truth, the moment when everything would permanently change. Ready? Daniel asked. Ready? They walked to the entrance hand in hand, and Emma realized she no longer cared who might see them. She didn't care about the scandal, the gossip, the social disapproval. She cared only about the man at her side and the justice they were about to serve. Agent Johnson received them immediately, clearly intrigued by the presence of Daniel Bradford, accompanied by an unknown young woman. But when Daniel began to explain, when he began to show the evidence, the agent's expression changed from curiosity to absolute shock. My God, he murmured, leafing through the photographs. This is monstrous. It's real, Daniel said. Every document, every name, every crime, all real. And you're sure these people are still active? At least 5 of them. And probably more that we haven't identified yet. Johnson looked at Emma. And you, miss, what is your involvement in this? My mother was killed for discovering these crimes. I dedicated my life to finding evidence. Your mother? Teresa Collins. She worked at the Bradford mansion and documented everything she could. When she was discovered, she was murdered. Murdered how? Poisoned. To make it look like natural death. Johnson closed his eyes for a moment, processing the information. You know you're in mortal danger, don't you? We know, Daniel replied. That's why we're here. That's why we're delivering everything. I'll need you as witnesses. You'll have to be available for testimony trials. We will be available, but I'll also recommend police protection. At least until the main suspects are arrested. That won't be necessary, Daniel said. We have our own security plans. Johnson studied the two for a moment. Is there anything else I should know? Something personal between you? Emma and Daniel looked at each other. "Yes," Emma finally said, "there is something personal. Which would be, I love him, and he loves me, despite everything, because of everything." "Interesting," Johnson smiled for the first time. "So you two have even more reasons to want to see justice done?" "Yes." "Very well. I'll start the investigations immediately, but I want you to be very careful. Men like these don't hesitate to kill to protect their secrets. We will be careful and stay in touch. I want to know where you are at all times." "Yes, sir." When they left the FBI building, Emma felt an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. They had done it. They had delivered the evidence. Now it was just a matter of time until the culprits were arrested. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked. "Relieved, scared, hopeful?" Emma smiled. "Free." "Free?" "Free from the weight of the secret. Free from the responsibility of carrying everything alone. Free to just be. And what do you want to be?" "Yours, if you still want me." Daniel stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, pulling her close. "I will always want you. No matter what happens, no matter what dangers we face, no matter what the world thinks, even if it means giving up your social position." "My social position was built on blood. I'd rather be poor and honest by your side than rich and corrupt alone." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Daniel kissed her right there on the street, under the morning sun, not caring who might see. "You are my redemption, Emma. My chance to be the man I should have been from the beginning. And you are my healing, my proof that not all Bradfords are monsters. Then let's go. Let's go to a place where we can just be us, away from the crimes, away from the past, away from everything that separated us." "Where to?" "To the future. Our future." They walked back to the car, and Emma realized that for the first time in her adult life she wasn't running away from something. She was running toward something, toward love, toward hope, toward the possibility of happiness. It wouldn't be easy. There would be trials, testimonies, perhaps threats. But they would face everything together. Because true love wasn't just about the happy moments. It was about choosing to stand by someone, even when the whole world was against you. It was about building something beautiful over the ruins of what came before. It was about believing that redemption was possible, that forgiveness was real, that the future could be better than the past. And as they drove toward the countryside, toward the small house where they could begin a new life, Emma knew her mother would be proud, not just for bringing justice, but for choosing love instead of revenge, for choosing to build instead of destroy, for proving that not all Bradfords were monsters, and that not all stories ended in tragedy. Some, the most beautiful ones, ended in hope. The countryside house was a sanctuary of simplicity amid the chaos they had left behind. Located in a small town called Clear Waters, 2 hours from Boston, it was the complete opposite of the Bradford mansion. Small, cozy, with gardens that grew freely, and a porch where you could watch the sunset painting the sky gold. It was there that Emma and Daniel had taken refuge for the past 2 months, waiting for justice to take its course. The first days had been strange. After years of living under the constant pressure of revenge and secrecy, Emma didn't know how to exist in a world where she could simply be happy. She woke up in the morning looking for a mission, for a battle to fight, only to remember that now her only mission was to learn to love and be loved. Daniel faced his own demons. Accustomed to running companies, making decisions that affected hundreds of people, controlling every aspect of his life, he now found himself in a simple house, making breakfast for the woman he loved, watering plants, reading books that had nothing to do with business. It was a form of forced therapy, a detox from power that revealed the man he truly was when stripped of his corporate armor. "You're different," Emma had observed one morning, as she watched him prepare scrambled eggs with the concentration of a professional chef. "Different how?" "Lighter. More present." "Present?" "Yes. Before, even when you were with me, part of your mind was always elsewhere, in business, in responsibilities, in the weight of being a Bradford. Now you're here. Completely here." Daniel had smiled, a smile she noticed was appearing more frequently. "Maybe because here I can be just Daniel, not the heir, not the company president, not the man who carries his father's sins, just a man who loves a woman." "And how does it feel being just a man?" "Liberating, frightening, but mainly real. It was in this simple reality that they were building something new. No servants, no protocol, none of the layers of formality that had defined their initial interaction. Emma cooked, Daniel washed dishes, he tended the garden, she organized the house. They shared tasks, shared dreams, shared the simple double bed that had become the center of their universe. Physical intimacy had come naturally, without hurry, without pressure. One night, as they watched the rain fall outside the living room window, Emma had nestled closer to him on the sofa. Daniel had run his fingers through her hair. She had raised her face to look at him, and the kiss that followed was different from all others. There was no urgency, no desperation, just the quiet certainty that they belonged to each other. "Are you sure?" he had whispered against her lips. "Absolutely. There's no going back. I don't want to go back." What happened after was a revelation for both. Emma discovered that making love with Daniel wasn't just about physical desire, but about complete emotional surrender. Each of his touches erased another scar from the past. Each kiss rewrote the story she had carried about herself. She wasn't just the daughter of the dead maid, wasn't just a woman thirsting for revenge. She was a woman loved, desired, valued. For Daniel, loving Emma physically was like finding the piece that was missing in his soul. Each of her moans, each way her body responded to his, each moment of vulnerability she shared, proved that he was capable of being good, of being gentle, of being the kind of man who deserved true love. "I love you," he had murmured against her skin, afterward, as she rested in his arms. "I know, I feel it. How? In the way you touch me, as if I were precious. As if I were sacred. You are, even being who I am, especially for being who you are." But even in the peace of clear waters, the outside world continued to exist. Agent Johnson called regularly with updates on the investigation. Robert Caldwell had been arrested along with 2 of his associates. The searches of their properties had revealed even more evidence, documents that confirmed decades of crimes. More than 400 victims identified so far, Johnson had informed during one of his calls. And that's just what we've been able to document. The real number is probably much higher. "And the trials?" Daniel asked. "They begin next month. I'll need you as key witnesses." "We'll be there. There's something else you should know. The press has discovered the story, not the details, but they know that the Bradford heir is cooperating with the investigation of a human trafficking network." Emma felt her stomach tighten. What do they know exactly? That Daniel handed over evidence about crimes committed by his father's associates. That there's a woman involved, but they haven't identified you specifically yet. How much time do we have before they find out? Not much. Maybe a week, 2 at most. When the call ended, Emma and Daniel sat in silence for a long time. They knew this moment would come, but they still weren't ready to face public scrutiny. "Do you regret it?" Daniel finally asked. "Regret what?" "Choosing this path, choosing me." "Never." Emma took his hand. "And you?" "Never. But I worry about you, about what they'll say, what they'll write." "Let them say, let them write. We know the truth. We do. But it won't be easy. Nothing worth having is easy, and it wasn't easy." When the first article was published a week later, the phone in the house wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, curious people, even Daniel's old acquaintances who wanted to know if the accusations were true. "Bradford heir exposes human trafficking network linked to father," read the headline in the main newspaper. "Family fortune built on heinous crimes." The article didn't mention Emma by name, but described a mysterious woman who had been instrumental in exposing the crimes. There was speculation about her identity, her relationship with Daniel, her motives. "They make it sound like you're an opportunist," Emma commented, reading the article for the 5th time. "Let them. It doesn't matter to me. It should matter. Your reputation, your company. My company can survive scandals, my reputation can be rebuilt, but I can't survive without you." "Daniel." "No. Listen to me." He knelt before her, taking her hands. "I don't care what they write, I don't care what they think, I don't care if I lose everything as long as I have you. You won't lose everything. I might. And that's okay. Because I've discovered that I don't need the Bradford Empire to be happy. I just need you. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. In fact," Daniel hesitated as if gathering courage for something, "there's something I want to ask you." "What?" "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Emma felt her heart race, but also a pang of fear. Daniel, I know it's early, that it's complicated, that the whole world will say it's madness, but I don't care. I want you to be my wife. I want us to build a life together. I want us to have children and create a family that is everything our original families weren't. And if it goes wrong, it won't go wrong. How can you be sure? Because what we have isn't based on convenience or interest. It's based on truth, on the purest truth I've ever experienced. Emma looked at the man kneeling before her, seeing beyond the handsome face, beyond the natural elegance, beyond everything he represented. Seeing the man who had chosen justice over family loyalty, who had chosen love over power, who had chosen her above all else. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Daniel stood up and kissed her with an intensity that took her breath away, and in that moment, Emma knew that no matter what the world thought, no matter what storm they would face it together. News of the engagement leaked 2 weeks later, when they were seen buying rings at a small jeweler in town. The reaction was immediate and intense. "Scandal! Bradford heir engaged to mysterious maid," screamed the headlines. "Who is the woman who won the heart of Boston's richest businessman? Romance or interest? The truth about the Bradford engagement." But along with the malicious speculation, there were also voices of support. Other victims of similar crimes began to speak out, praising Daniel's courage in exposing his father's crimes. Human rights organizations congratulated him for his decision to cooperate with justice. "You're becoming a hero," Emma observed, reading the positive comments. "I'm not a hero. I just did what I should have done a long time ago." Even so, none of it matters if I don't have you by my side." The trial began in September, 3 months after they had handed over the evidence. Emma and Daniel returned to Boston to testify, facing for the first time the frenzy of the press and public curiosity. The courtroom was packed. Victims' families, journalists, curious onlookers, all wanting to see the man who had betrayed his own family for justice and the woman who had won his heart. When Emma took the witness stand, she had to make a conscious effort not to tremble. Everyone in the room was staring at her, evaluating, judging, speculating about her motivations. "State your full name for the court," asked the prosecutor. "Emma Teresa Collins." "And your relationship with the Bradford family?" "My mother, Teresa Collins, worked as a domestic servant at the Bradford mansion from 1998 to 2004. She was murdered by Richard Bradford after discovering evidence of the crimes we're judging today." A murmur ran through the room. This was the first time the connection between Emma and the Bradford family had been publicly revealed. "And your relationship with the defendant, Daniel Bradford?" "I love him. And I'm going to marry him. Despite his family having killed your mother, Daniel Bradford didn't kill my mother. His father did. Daniel is the man who helped me find justice for her." The testimony continued for hours. Emma told her story from the beginning: the orphaned childhood, the search for truth, the discovery of her mother's recordings, the decision to infiltrate the Bradford mansion. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Daniel testified the following day, and his testimony was equally powerful. He didn't try to absolve himself, didn't try to minimize his father's crimes. He assumed moral responsibility, explained how he had discovered the truth, how he had decided to cooperate with justice. "Why did you decide to expose your own father's crimes?" asked the defense attorney, clearly trying to paint him as a traitor. "Because some things are more important than family loyalty. Justice is one of them. Love is another." "Love?" "Yes. Love for Emma Collins, the woman who showed me that I could be better than my blood. Love for the victims who deserve to have their stories told. Love for a future where crimes like these don't happen anymore. And don't you benefit financially by eliminating competitors? There's no financial benefit in destroying your own family's reputation. There's no benefit in exposing crimes that tarnish your own name. I did it because it was the right thing to do." The trial lasted 3 weeks. When it finally ended, all the defendants were sentenced to long prison terms. Robert Caldwell received life imprisonment. Other associates received sentences of 15 to 20 years. "Justice has been served," Agent Johnson told Emma and Daniel after the sentencing. "Your mother can rest in peace." "Yes," Emma agreed, tears streaming down her face. "She can. The wedding took place a month later, in a small ceremony at the church in Clear Waters. Only close friends and some relatives were present. Emma wore a simple but elegant dress that she had sewn herself. Daniel wore a simple suit, without the ostentation of the clothes he used to wear. You, Daniel and Emma, have chosen each other not despite the circumstances, but because of them, the pastor said during the ceremony. You chose love over hatred, forgiveness over revenge, building over destruction. May this marriage be an example to all of us that it is possible to find light in darkness. When they exchanged rings, Emma felt that her mother was there somehow, not just as a memory but as a presence, blessing the union that had been born from her struggle for justice. "I love you," Daniel whispered when they kissed. "I love you," she replied. And this time there was no more fear, no more doubt, no more secrets, just pure, true, eternal love. In the months that followed, Emma and Daniel began to build a life that neither had imagined possible. Daniel completely restructured his businesses, focusing on social investments and organizations that fought human trafficking. Emma created a foundation in her mother's name, dedicated to helping victims of similar crimes. The Teresa Collins Foundation, she had decided, so that never again will a mother die trying to protect children. "It's perfect," Daniel agreed. "She would be proud." "I hope so. I know so, because she raised a daughter who transformed tragedy into hope, who transformed hatred into love, who proved that it is possible to break cycles of violence and create something beautiful." 2 years later, when Emma discovered she was pregnant, she went to her mother's grave for the first time since childhood. She placed fresh flowers on the simple headstone and sat on the grass beside it. "Hello, Mom," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I know it's been a long time since I've been here, but there were things I needed to resolve first." The wind rustled the trees around as if Teresa were listening. "I did it, Mom. I got justice. I exposed the crimes. I made the guilty pay for what they did." Emma touched her belly where a new life was growing, but more importantly, I learned to forgive. I learned to love. I managed to build a family that you would approve of. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. "I'm going to have a baby, Mom. I'm going to be a mother, and I swear I'll be half the woman you were. I'll protect my child as you protected me. I'll teach them about justice, about kindness, about courage." Emma stayed at the cemetery until sunset, telling her mother about her life, her dreams, her future. When she finally got up to leave, she felt a peace she had never experienced before. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Daniel was waiting for her in the car, and when she approached, he saw something different in her eyes. No more pain, no more anger, just peace. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Complete. Finally complete." "Ready to go home?" "Yes, ready to go home." And as they drove back to Clear Waters, back to the simple and happy life they had built together, Emma knew that her journey was finally over. Not the journey of revenge that had begun years ago, but the journey of healing, of love, of discovering that it was possible to be happy even after so much suffering. Her mother had died so that she could have justice. But more importantly, she had died so that she could have love. And now, with the child growing in her womb, with the man she loved by her side, with a life built on truth and hope, Emma knew she hadn't wasted Teresa's sacrifice. She had transformed it into something beautiful. She had proved that love is stronger than hatred. She had shown that redemption is possible. And she had created a legacy that honored her mother's memory in all the ways that mattered. The sun was setting over Clear Waters as they returned home, and Emma knew that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a life where love had conquered hatred, where light had conquered darkness, where hope had conquered despair, and where two people who should have been enemies had become the perfect definition of true love. Forever,